Afghanistan. These men were soldiers in the Northern Alliance, those that held the Taliban at bay. Now they are the bodyguards of Tariq Amin Saeed, the governor of Badakhshan province in the far north of the country. An ex-Mujahideen, he now presides over one of the largest opium, poppy and heroin producing areas in Afghanistan. Now he claims to be trying to end the opium trade.
تخم بذری بودیم، کود کیمیایی بودیم، به مردم کار پیدا کنیم، مثلا پروژه های عامل منفعه از قبیل برق، سرک‌ها، کلینیک‌ها، مکاتب‌ها بوده باشه و کار برای مردم پیدا شود، جلوگیری از این آسان است.
Easy to say, but since September the 11th, the Northern Alliance, newly allied with the West, has presided over a planting spree that has more than doubled the region's opium production. After a brief halt in poppy growing in the last year of the Taliban, Afghan heroin is now destined to swamp the cities of Russia, Europe, and the rest of the world. Afghanistan is a country devastated by a quarter of a century of war. Bankrupted from years of fighting, there is one currency of value: the opium poppy. It grows well in Central Asia. For years, the opium trade helped fund the military campaigns of both the Northern Alliance and their Taliban enemies.
The only thing that drove the economy were narcotics and weapons. The same people sold narcotics, sold weapons. And when I talk about weapons, I'm talking about surface-to-air missiles, tanks, landmines, machine guns, everything a conventional army would have.
Caught in the middle, as always, are the civilians, up to half of whom are involved in some aspect of the opium industry. Saeed Ahmed, unemployed with a large family to support, found himself forced to grow opium.
نام سعید احمد است. سابق وظیفه معلم بود. جنگ‌ها شروع شد، مکتب‌ها سقوط کرد، زندگی خراب شد. جنگ باعث بدبختی وطن، سرنوشت مملکت شد. بالاخره دروازه‌های مکتب بسته شد، معاش برای معلمین قطع شد. معلم، چون من معلم بودم دیگه معاش نداشتم. توان زندگی می ده همی بود که 10 نفر یا شخور دارم. راه دیگه را پیدا نکردم، مجبور به شدم که در یک زمین خردی که مربوط ما بود از را تریاک کشت کنیم. از مردم پیسه گرفتیم، محصولی را خریدیم تا که معماری حیات کردیم، اولاد ما را از نجات دادیم. دیگه یک تعداد بسیار محدود از این پول پیدا میکنه، اونا قاچاقبرا هستند. دهقان از این نفع بسیار کوچکی داره که فقط اونمو امرار حیات روزمره‌اش میکنه.
A good yield of opium, 10 kilograms, may net the farmer around $500. Just enough to get through the year. The big profits start with the traders who spirit the opium away to remote mountain laboratories to turn it into heroin. The United Nations estimates that the value of this year's harvest, if it were all sold on the streets of Europe, is over $100 billion. A heroin lab isn't much to look at. Simple sheds with drums to convert opium to morphine base, then heroin. Intelligence reports and satellite photography indicate Afghanistan has 200 heroin laboratories, with a high concentration along its northern border with Tajikistan. This border is rapidly becoming the new heroin highway to Europe, following the Silk Road of old. Like silk, from which fabulous profits were made, heroin is light, portable, and has hungry markets in the West. But unlike silk, heroin destroys millions of lives in the countries it passes through and sows the seeds of instability. The 5 Central Asian nations of the old Silk Road, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, are ill-equipped to fight a war on drugs that even wealthy Western nations can't win. Tashkent in Uzbekistan. The regional office of the United Nations Drug Control and Crime Program in Central Asia.
And what about the security of the trip? Do you think that everything would be all right?
Antonella Deleda, an Italian from Rome, has been the head of the UN program here for 2 years.
Security issues in Kyrgyzstan.
She's embarking on an expedition through 3 countries in a bid to strengthen regional cooperation to cut the flow of drugs.
Ciao, cara. Not bad. Okay, what's next?
We've been so far mainly engaged in the so-called supply reduction side, meaning the interdiction effort. But ever since the local populations have started being affected by the drug transit in terms of establishment of consumer markets, we've been increasingly committed in trying to tackle this issue as well.
Tajikistan, high in the Pamir Mountains. Antonella Deleda leads a UN convoy that will travel more than 2,000 kilometers along the drug trafficking routes of Central Asia to assess border controls and gather intelligence. Escorting Deleda is General Rustam Nazarov, a man with one of the most dangerous jobs in the region. He's the founding head of the Tajikistan Drug Control Agency, which was established in 1999.
Я думаю, что сегодня борьба с наркотиками – это и есть война. Война со злом, война с преступностью, война с терроризмом. Потому что, как я думаю, что от этого, наверное, зависит будущее Таджикистана, будущее наших детей.
Вольно.
The Drug Control Agency's store of weapons.
Автоматы Калашникова. Здесь 7,62, 5,45 калибра. Разного калибра.
Nazarov's agents are up against powerful enemies who often shoot first. The general has survived 2 assassination attempts. Tajikistan's drug agency, the DCA, is the only national organization in the world entirely financed by the United Nations. In the poorest country of the former Soviet Union, it's an experiment in fighting widespread corruption. Paying its officers 10 times the salary of a local policeman, the hope is they'll resist the temptation to pocket drugs or take bribes.
You don't have much time to organize this trip because you can only do it between end of May and June. Otherwise it's either too cold or too hot.
Antonella Deleda's UN program and General Nazarov's agency have an almost impossible task of stopping drugs at the rugged border with Afghanistan.
Рельеф границы, высокогорье и труднодоступность не позволяют строить какие-то инженерно-технические сооружения. И вот рельеф также не позволяет в некоторых участках осуществлять и визуальный контроль границы со стороны пограничных нарядов.
This journey will take the UN mission through nations whose authoritarian regimes have done little to stave off widespread destitution, where an average of 60% of the population lives below the poverty line.
Many people in Central Asia are in a situation of despair. They are groping for some sort of ideology which might promise them a better life or sense for their life.
In such desperate circumstances, these countries, with 80% Islamic populations, have the potential to breed radicalism. The drugs trade fuels this potential instability by providing a ready source of funds for Islamic or other militants.
This poppy cultivation is a threat for the rest of the world, including the West, not excepting the United States. So I think this is for this very reason that one should be very careful about the stability, the future, the social balances in Central Asia.
If there is a front line in the drug war, this is it. The Tajik border with Afghanistan, 1,200 kilometers long. Running the whole length of the border is the Pianj River, separating an Afghanistan stuck in almost medieval times on the far side, and a Tajikistan still struggling to come to terms with the 21st century on this side. The few isolated border bridges across the Pianj are well guarded. But most of the traffic is food aid heading south into Afghanistan. The traffickers take their chances by crossing the river.
Основная особенность данного участка заключается в том, что здесь рельеф местности не позволяет осуществлять полноценную охрану государственной границы. Основной преградой для наркоконтрабандистов, конечно, после пограничников и правоохранительных органов является вот эта вот река Пянж.
Most of the drugs are swum across the Pianj with inner tubes at night. With 80% unemployment in this border area, there is no shortage of people willing to act as couriers in exchange for a tiny share of the profits.
Разница в цене героина на той стороне и на этой очень большая, в несколько порядков. Именно это помогает контрабандистам не бояться этой реки и, рискуя собственной жизнью, переправляться на наш берег.
Colonel Vladimir Makushin is a Russian. It's a quirk of history that despite a decade of independence, the Russian border guard are still in control of the Tajik frontier. They've remained with the support of a government fearful of the prospect of radical Islam seeping north from Afghanistan. Stopping drug smugglers came later.
Обычно происходит так. Пограничные наряды находятся вдоль всей линии границы, либо в наиболее вероятных местах проникновения наркодельцов. После того, как наркодельцы переправляются на наш берег, пограничники их задерживают. Если в ходе задержания применяется оружие нарушителями, то, естественно, пограничники вступают в бой, подтягиваются резервы.
In 2001, the Russian border guards say they were involved in 80 armed clashes in which 60 smugglers were killed and 300 arrested. Wounded in a shootout, this Afghan smuggler was left behind by his comrades.
این مواد یعنی آزرش که بود من نمیفهمم اون مردکه که کدوم رقمی که داشت قطعا مردم دیگه اون داشت دیگه
چند پول میتیم گفت اگر همین گذرونی
$30
For over a century, the old Silk Road nations were part of the Russian and then the Soviet Empire. Since September the 11th, they now provide military bases for the US and its allies to help cleanse Afghanistan of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. There are military bases in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, accommodating 4,000, with plans for 2 more facilities.
I'm absolutely certain that this government is intentionally ignoring the chaos, the revival of the narcotics market, and the chaos and human rights violations in Central Asia in order to keep our bases in place, unfettered.
While the US-led coalition against terrorism operates from nearby bases, the United Nations team travels across the Pamir Mountains to the border between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan.
One thing is to look at the map or read the reports about it. The one thing is to see it. Well, you can see yourself how difficult it is to control these borders.
Here the UN team meet a demoralized detachment high in the mountains where temperatures can plummet to 40 degrees below zero.
So normally our major troubles will come when the weather conditions aggravate, when the temperature is dropping below zero and there are no living facilities here.
Their conditions are primitive. They have no electricity, they can't afford fuel for the diesel generator, and for most of the year it's simply too cold to use an inspection pit that the UN paid for.
Аппаратура у нас есть, вот лежат там они, из ООН привезли хорошая аппаратура. Даже металл там на 7 миллиметров просвечивает. Но опять же, нет проблемы с электричеством.
The guards do a token search for their UN visitors, but they told us they rarely find anything of significance unless they've been previously warned. As this footage shows, the traffickers practice an advanced art of concealment. This truck passed straight through the border post. It was stopped later at a checkpoint in Kyrgyzstan with Afghan heroin in its fuel tanks. Total value on the streets of Europe, over $25 million. Driving the truck was Boris Petrovich, married with 2 sons. He has yet to come to trial, but admits his involvement.
Ну, информация, видать, поступила сразу, меня задержали, все, сказали, что у тебя есть, сразу обнаружили, уже знали, где лежит, все у меня, они находятся. Так было.
The drug agents who arrested him say they'd had a tip-off, but they say they don't know who was behind the shipment.
Ну, а как объяснить это? Я же уже сказал, что недостаток, и все, из-за этого пошел. Для меня это большие деньги считаются. Ничего еще.
He faces a 13-year sentence in the city of Osh. One more city of the old Silk Road, now notorious as a transit point for Afghan heroin. But not all the heroin passing through Osh is destined to blight the lives of European drug users. Bustina Marcus has spent 10 years closely observing Central Asia as a political analyst. She sees the flood of heroin from Afghanistan having a devastating effect on its near neighbors.
There's a strong feeling now that the countries surrounding Afghanistan have the highest per capita levels of heroin addicts. Iran coming in number 1, Pakistan number 2, and the numbers are very high. In Iran, they think that it's about 1 in 42 people is probably an abuser of opiates or heroin. In Pakistan, 1 in 47. In Tajikistan, they think it's 1 in 50. That's 2% of the population. You're talking about an awful lot of people of working age who could be productive in reconstructing that country who aren't.
Even the most conservative figures put the number of addicts in the old Silk Road nations at 500,000 and multiplying at an alarming rate. There are treatment centers in a few of the major cities, but only for those that can afford them. A traditional meal being prepared in a choikana, or tea house. When they have a little money to spare, Elmurad Kasim and his friends come here to relax. Elmurad is 21 years old, studying English at university in the city of Osh. He isn't optimistic about his prospects for employment in this city when he graduates.
People frustrated with the current situation, any economical, social, political, whatever situation, want to forget this world, want to forget their land, want to forget where they are. So the way to forget that is either drinking alcohol or using drugs.
Since independence from the Soviets, unemployment has soared to more than half the working age population. This silk factory used to be a mainstay of employment. Once thousands poured out through these gates. Now it's just a trickle. The heroin trade is now the only growth industry.
I know families that lost their children, that they lost their sons at early 20s. They died overdosing. We're losing these young people in all aspects, in all understandings of the word of losing. We're losing them as human beings. We're losing them as good labor. We're losing them as good neighbors. We're just losing them. They're becoming nothing.
Osh is seeing a dramatic rise in addiction amongst its young. Even more alarming are the beginnings of an HIV outbreak. Needle exchange points are finding that half the returned needles test HIV positive. The Silk Route was never just one road. It's a network of foot tracks, trails, roads and highways forged by traders over the centuries. And every one of them exploited today by narco-traffickers.
So we are around here now. And going into the Tabidala.
1 week into their journey, at the Tajik town of Horog, the UN team witnessed the destruction of seized drugs. The UN says Tajikistan's haul of opiates last year was 8,000 kilos. half raw opium. The rest, heroin.
По уголовным делам изъято на границе, некоторые в автомашинах, и есть, в которой изъято у нас прямо из квартиры.
А это сколько у нас?
Килограмм.
А маркировка есть какая? Что написано?
999 опять. 39. Again, 999.
Ага.
Конечно, я удовлетворен тем, что изъятые наркотики уничтожаются, а преступники, причастные к их транзиту, привлекаются к уголовной ответственности.
But for every kilo they destroy, about 9 kilos gets through. By the most conservative estimates, over 40 tons of heroin a year passes through Tajikistan undetected.
Probably the bulk of the interdictions is represented by petty couriers. But it is interesting to see how the Drug Control Agency, for example, is getting a higher average of seizures. And of course, it is a very delicate balance, because they can only achieve so much without being themselves at risk.
I know, for instance, that the KGB in Tajikistan attempted to go after the narcotics dealers. And what happened is the officers were caught and they were tortured to death by having their fingers cut off. These are KGB officers right up to the elbows until they died of loss of blood.
When your life is also at stake, there's even more incentive to turn a blind eye or get involved. In just one example of many, in 1997, 8 Russian military officers were detained trying to carry 8 kilos of drugs out of an airport in Tajikistan. Robert Bayer was the CIA's man in Tajikistan in the early 90s and was an eyewitness to drug smuggling by the Russian military.
When I was in Tajikistan, I had a friend. He was a Russian military officer, and he was opposed to the narcotics trade. And I said, well, what are the Russians doing about it? And he says, you don't understand. The Russians are part and parcel of the problem. And I said, what do you mean? So he took me in his Jeep, and we drove to one end of the airport. And we watched helicopters come in, Russian military helicopters, unload sacks, huge sacks of raw opium, which was then put into a Russian transport plane with clear Russian military markings, and he said it's on its way to Moscow.
В любом государстве в той или иной степени существует коррупция. В любом государстве. Коррупция, допустим, связана с наркотиками. Бороться с этим злом. Но, с другой стороны, мы ведем и активную работу по разоблачению, будем говорить, преступников в форме. И не скрываем это, задерживаем своих сотрудников, я имею в виду в правоохранительные органы Республики Таджикистан, привлекаем их к уголовной ответственности, независимо от званий или должностей, от их положения.
A senior official of the Tajik Customs Agency recently admitted that as many as 50% of its officers are to some extent involved in the drug trade.
Very often the little trader who's actually just bringing his potatoes and rice over who has the hardest time because it's very difficult for them to pay any substantial bribes, but somebody transporting heroin is already probably has his cash on the side. And I've heard stories from border guards as well that guys would be crossing the border and they'd be coming in a very suspicious vehicle, but then they walk over to the border post with a case of vodka, leave it to the guys, and the guys would say, okay, well, when we pick it up to walk away, you drive by them, we didn't see anything.
This customs official was too afraid to show her face on camera.
Вы знаете, Это престижная работа быть таможенником, но надо быть честным таможенником, чтобы гордиться своей профессией. Но с другой стороны, когда вас окружают люди, которые продаются, люди, которые могут совершить, как вы сказали, закрыть глаза на что-то, да, с другой стороны, как-то за этих людей становится обидно.
Antonella Deleta and General Nazarov visit a regional office of the DCA in Tajikistan to see how the flow of drugs from Afghanistan has grown since the fall of the Taliban.
What is the main change that you have noticed since September 11 in the traffic patterns?
Значит, дело в том, что, во-первых, здесь я бы хотел сказать, изменения, вот дело в том, что значит есть, так, значит, у нас данные, есть такие, значит, информации, которые, значит, наоборот, не уменьшается, увеличивается. Поступающие, значит, в этом, значит, наркотики к нам в республике, большой процент от нас уходит.
Also about the kind of heroin that is sold in the local market and the price, the retail price.
The retail price of one dose of heroin is fluctuating between 4 to 5 somoni. A little bit more than $1. So the imported beer cost about 3.5 somoni, so, which is approximately equal to the price of one dose of heroin.
The price of one beer and a fix of heroin in Central Asia may be comparable, but the profits from transporting heroin to Europe are enormous.
Only heroin.
Dushanbe Market, Tajikistan. While drug barons remain immune, the jails are overflowing with small-time couriers, a third of whom are women. One of those caught in 1998 was this woman, Zarina. Back in Soviet times, she was a librarian at a university. Now she's trying to support 2 children on the couple of dollars she makes each week selling discarded clothing.
Они мне очень хорошо помогают. Они вот приходят, спрашивают, подкидывают денег. Когда я уже говорю, все, нет у меня дома ничего. Вот, например, 4 дня до вчерашнего дня, 4 дня вот эти дети не ели горячего.
She tried to adapt to post-Soviet capitalism, borrowing money to start importing Russian goods. The economy collapsed, and so did her business. The moneylenders moved in and took everything. As she went down the economic spiral, she saw others climbing up.
Смотрю, все стали почему-то резко богатеть. Когда я начала спрашивать, она говорит, съездила, отвезла наркотики, приехала. Мне тоже как раз потом предложили, зная мое положение, мне тоже предложили отвезти наркотики. Сказали, мы тебе купим билет туда и обратно. Поедешь, отвезешь и получишь $200. Так что, по-моему, за 3 дня $200 – это очень нормальная сумма.
With 200 grams of heroin sealed in a condom and hidden inside her body, Zarina went to catch the plane to Moscow.
Я приехала в аэропорт, когда я проходила таможенный досмотр. Меня культурно попросили пойти провериться. Там летят 200-250 человек. Неужели из этих 250 сразу именно к тебе подходят?
Zarina was to spend 3 years in this jail. She claims that custom officials offered to let her go in exchange for $5,000. Here, 3/4 of the inmates are petty traffickers, and tuberculosis is rife. Zarina was lucky. She was released in an amnesty, But a year later, she remains as impoverished as ever, desperate enough to wonder if she might not be tempted again.
Ну, вы знаете, на данном этапе у меня опять-таки такая же ситуация. Точно такая же ситуация. Но пока не были мысли плюнуть на все и опять-таки. Вы знаете, вот то, что я не видела все-таки 3 года свою маму, лишила своих детей материнской заботы, это все-таки перевешивает.
Zarina might have been luckier if she'd come here instead, to Kulyab Airport in Tajikistan. Officials point out to the UN team broken equipment 3 decades old and a lack of simple communications.
Сопровождение и своевременные сообщения одной службе другому по цепочке. У нас, говорю же, ни рации, ни телефон. Что вот позвонить отсюда, надо сбегать в Куляб, посидеть там 2 часа, посидеть, выйти в аэропорт и сообщить. За это время самолет 45 минут уже на посадку идет. Человек ушел. Уже там никуда не денется.
With 2 flights a day at this airport, not a single drug seizure has been made in a year. Yet plans are afoot to start weekly flights to Moscow and Tehran.
All controls in these countries are very, very poor because of the lack of capacities. Places like Kulyab are definitely extremely attractive from the point of view of drug traffickers because the controls are poor.
Such failures go beyond the mere lack of resources. Here too, there is a sinister side. Customs officials told us that they are frequently told who to search and who to let through unchecked. With customs officials' wages under $50 per month, accepting bribes is an easy temptation. Uzbekistan. This is an exercise for drug-sniffing dogs. But these dogs are also trained to be deployed against others deemed enemies of the state. The US State Department reports that Uzbekistan is run by an authoritarian regime with only limited civil rights. In 1999, it tasted terrorism for the first time, when 16 people were killed by car bombs exploded here in the capital, Tashkent. The government blamed it on the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which was designated as a terrorist organization by the US in 2000.
Наркобизнес является одним из главнейших источников финансирования, также и такой террористической организации, как так называемое исламское движение Узбекистана.
But Uzbekistan's war on drugs provides cover for its repression of all Islamic opposition, moderate or radical. Officers from the National Security Service firmly link drugs with terrorism.
Безусловно, доходы от незаконного оборота наркотиков являются одним из основных источников финансовой подпитки международных террористических и экстремистских организаций. Как свидетельствуют имеющиеся данные, при режиме Талибан в Афганистане было официально разрешено и поощрялось выращивание наркосодержащих растений, а также производство и торговля сильнодействующими наркотиками.
In Uzbekistan, only state-registered mosques like this one can now remain open, and religious services are tightly controlled. Hundreds of independent mosques have been barred and shuttered. In In Uzbekistan today, a man can be detained for simply growing a beard, which is interpreted as a sign of extremism. But amongst an estimated 7,000 political prisoners, there are many that human rights organizations say have been jailed under the false pretext of trafficking. Matilda Bogner is an Australian lawyer married to an Afghan. A researcher with Human Rights Watch in Tashkent, she's lived in the region for many years.
The authorities have used drugs to crack down on opponents by basically by planting narcotics in the pockets of people that they want to arrest. It provides a reason to arrest people and then to put them in prison for long periods.
At this courthouse, Nagora Kamarova, a doctor, is being prosecuted for allegedly possessing banned Islamic literature. Her husband, a devout Muslim, is already in jail. Because her house is under constant police surveillance and she's afraid of being seen talking to foreigners, she goes to the home of a friend where she can speak more freely.
Hamma yog'izani tintuv qildi. Ertalab 7:30dan soat 10:30gacha 3 soat davomida tintuv bo'ldi. Hech narsa topisha olmadi. O'sha oshxonada ishlatiladigan pichoqlar bor-ku, osh pichoqlar. O'shalarni keyin suvenirni ikkita qilichimizni gilamda osib o'tirgan. Video kasetalar bor edi, ularni olib ketishdi. 2 soatdan keyin keladilar.
Her story is given credence by Human Rights Watch in Tashkent, which is following her case.
Shu 2 soat hali davom etyapti. Ertada doпрос qilishibdi, keyin hech narsa ayb qo'yisha olmagandan 273-modda, ya'ni o'sha narkotik moddani sotish распространитель, shu modda bilan aybdor deb topilib, keyin chaylik 159 ni qo'shib 12 yilga qamab yuborishdi, xullas.
It's so clear that these people are being imprisoned for their religious beliefs rather than for the narcotics. But it provides an initial excuse for the arrest, and it's often during that initial period that people will be tortured and a confession extracted.
Islomiy shaxslarni ham o'z holiga qo'yib qo'yish kerak-da. Qani o'zligi qayerdan chiqadi? Nima bo'ladi? O'z holiga qo'yib qo'yish. Naborot, hozir davlat bu o'ziga teskari qilyapti-da, xalqqa o'ziga yaqinlashtirmay uzoqlashtiryapti-da. Bular ertalab hozir xalq bilan anaqa boshqaruv o'rtasida katta bir jarlik paydo bo'lyapti-da.
The most recent US State Department Human Rights report accuses the security services in Uzbekistan of routinely planting narcotics and banned Islamic literature on citizens to justify arrest. Western diplomats say that repressive practices like these generates further opposition to the government and is radicalizing moderate Muslims. Antonella Deleda returns after 2 weeks traveling the new drug routes of the ancient Silk Road. She has learnt just how much international support is required.
Central Asia is a crucial region. I believe that by leaving them alone without a wise support, we may expect a lot of trouble coming from Central Asia, and not only in terms of drugs. I think that September the 11th has shown this clearly. That's what we got from this trip.
Dushanbe railway station in Tajikistan. By rail, road and air, shipments of opiates leave the region every day bound for the markets of the north. In Russia, the demand for Afghan opiates has climbed by 40% a year since the mid-90s. The bumper Afghan harvest will deluge Europe with a flood of cheap heroin, supplying over 80% of its current use. Back at the source in Afghanistan, the focus is turning towards rebuilding the nation with the $4.5 billion of international aid that's been pledged. But aid workers warn of dire consequences if donor nations fail, as they have before, to stay the distance.
If the process of rebuilding Afghanistan fails as a result of lack of support from the international community, then it will have serious consequences on the country. There is a danger that Afghanistan will revert back to the era of warlords, the drug lords and feudal lords, and a disaster waiting to happen. The instability in Afghanistan will also create instability in the region. And instability in the region will have serious consequences on the rest of the world.
This is a scene that Europeans particularly would like to see repeated across Afghanistan: the eradication of poppy fields. This man, Abdul Qadir, was appointed vice president in the new regime. After having been a major player in the opium business, he staked a claim for Western aid by attempting to eradicate the poppy in his home region.
صحیح نو دغه د نور د شاوخوا ته خو نږدې کې نشته ان شاء الله
ان شاء الله چې نشته ده
نو موږ د دقانان سره خبره کړې چې سکهاله امتحانا موږ دنیاوالو ته خیو چې موږ د تاریخو د ختمولو سره آشنایی لرو که موږ سره سکهاله چا جایز کومک وکړ نو کال ته به سلو کې سل ختم وي او که جایز کومک چا ونه کړ نو بیا کال ته موږ نه داخله لرو او نه دامخ لرو چې چاته وایي چې تاسو نور تاریخ مکري او د دې میره ده چې دغه د سکهالافینو ختمېدو باندې خلکو دومره وقدا اخیسي وي چې کال ته به په خپلو بامو او په کوڅو په لارو کې ونه کړي.
Today, Vice President Qadir is dead. He was assassinated in broad daylight in front of 10 bodyguards within weeks of his appointment. No one can yet prove who was behind his murder, but in an Afghanistan where the poppy is power, many Afghans believe his death was drug-related. Afghan farmers like Syed Ahmad know that planting the poppy can produce a bitter harvest. But they'll go on planting until there's some other way to support their families.
تریاک دشمنی بشر است. بنابراین باز هم تقاضای ما از جوامع بین‌المللی هم است که در کار و بار در پروسه بازسازی وطن ما زودتر عمل بکنن و مردم ما را از چنگال بدبختی فعلا دوامگیر ماست نجات بدهند. بنابراین آرزوی ما باز هم است که با ما کار پیدا شود، پروژه های بازسازی، چون ما برق نداریم، گاز نداریم، زندگی ما مشکلات داریم. دیگه تریاک برای خاطر ما زهر میگه، زهری است، دشمنی بشر است، ولی ما دشمنی بشر نیستیم.
Because of the reasons that you have justified for growing poppy, can you tell me how many of you in this group, by raising your hands, are growing poppy as of now? So you're not growing poppy?
Yeah, no, he's not.
He's the only one. Anybody else?
They've been promised peace. It's yet to come.
The only one.
They've been promised billions of dollars in aid, and they're yet to see it. Without both, they'll go on producing opium, because they have to.
فقط از وقتی که ما همین تریاک که گرفتیم هست و تجارایی که با اونجا میبرون از این شهرها میرون اونا تجار هستن امر را برای او تسلیم میکنیم به دلیل ای که ما پیشکی فرضاً اگر یک تولی تریاک قیمتش 2 لک افغانی باشه و ما 50,000 میدیم 25,000 میدیم مثلا امان قدری که علاقمندی طفلهای جهان خارج به انترنت دیشنتن موتر تیاره به این چیزا اونا به این سطح ها برق به این شکلا که علاقمندی داره فقط طفلی مردمی ما علاقمندیش به یک نمون وقتی تریاک میرسه یک ساجق بیسکوت یا 4 افغانی که دستش میگیره عین شکل طفلی همون چیز که علاقمندی
In the end, Afghan opium is only half the problem. So long as there are lavish profits at the other end of the old Silk Road, and the people of Central Asia remain impoverished, the drug business and the instability it causes will continue. Only a committed and sustained effort on the part of the richer nations can begin to diminish it.
یارکی جان بیا با من ناری که اگر دل داری تو مرا خریداری که ما را میبرن شری بشر میفروشن اگر دل داری تو مرا چون ما خریداری که ای از راه یکی دور بدی دنت میایم ای بالا لبی بام برو زنت میایم ای بالا لبی بام گلا شکفت چپرات ای گل خواب سرده بچی زنت میایم